The air conditioning in Tunde Adeleke's penthouse office hummed like a restless beast, but it couldn't cool his rising temper. On the grainy security monitor, he watched the night cleaner, Blessing, reach into the receptionist's drawer. His jaw tightened. She wasn't just dusting, she was stealing. He watched her small, calloused hands scoop up a handful of coins, shining N50 and N100 pieces, and shove them into her apron pocket. Tunde felt a sharp sting of betrayal. He was a man who prided himself on excellence and integrity. He didn't tolerate thieves, no matter how small the theft. He stood up, his Italian leather shoes silent on the plush carpet as he stormed toward the elevator. He would catch her red-handed and end her career tonight. Tunde burst into the lobby, his voice booming like a clap of thunder. "Blessing, empty your pockets now." My story family, welcome back. If you believe that a person's character is tested in the dark, hit that subscribe button. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Let's see how far our family reaches today. Blessing froze, her body stiffening like a statue under the harsh fluorescent lights of the lobby. The coins clinked softly in her pocket, a sound that, to Tunde, rang as loud as a funeral bell. He stepped closer, the scent of his expensive oud perfume clashing with the faint smell of bleach and sweat that clung to her uniform. "I saw you on the camera, Blessing," Tunde said, his voice low and vibrating with a cold authority. "I pay you a fair wage. I gave you this job when others said you were overqualified and wouldn't stay. And this is how you repay me? Stealing from the receptionist?" Blessing didn't run. She didn't beg for mercy. Instead, her shoulders slumped, and a single, heavy tear tracked a path through the dust on her cheek. With trembling fingers, she reached into her apron and pulled out a small, tattered pocketbook alongside the handful of coins. "I am not a thief, sir," she whispered, her voice cracking like dry earth. "I am a debtor." She opened the notebook and held it out. Tunde snatched it, expecting to see some nonsensical scribbles. Instead, he saw a meticulous record written in neat, cramped handwriting. Oct 14, N50. Oct 22, N100, Nov 5, N50. Every single kobo she had taken over the last 3 months was documented, totaling exactly N2050. "What is this?" Tunde demanded, though his anger was beginning to be replaced by a nagging sense of unease. "It's my record of what I owe Ngozi," Blessing sobbed, finally breaking. "I was going to pay it back when my bonus came. But tonight, sir, my David is at the General Hospital. The crisis started at 6 p.m. His joints are swollen, he is screaming, and they won't even give him a drop of water or a paracetamol tablet without N5,000 deposit. I only had N4,650. I needed N350 more to save my son's life tonight." Tunde looked at the coins in her hand, 3 N100 notes and 1 N50. The exact amount. The weight of the world seemed to shift in that silent lobby. He looked at her worn-out shoes, then back at the notebook. "Sickle cell?" Tunde asked, his voice suddenly hollow, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. Blessing nodded frantically. "He is dying, sir. Please call the police if you must, but let me run to the hospital first. Let me save my boy." Tunde didn't say another word. He grabbed Blessing by the arm, not with the grip of an accuser, but with the urgency of a man possessed. He pulled her toward the private executive elevator, ignoring her gasps of confusion. "Sir? The police?" she stammered, clutching her notebook to her chest. "Forget the police, Blessing," Tunde growled, his voice thick with a sudden, raw emotion. "My car is downstairs. We are going to that hospital now." The descent felt like it took years. When the doors opened, they burst into the cool night air of Lagos. Tunde's driver started to jump out of the black Range Rover, but Tunde waved him away. sliding into the driver's seat himself. The engine roared to life, a beastly sound that echoed against the glass skyscrapers of Victoria Island. The blast of the AC in the Range Rover was ice cold, but Blessing was shivering for a different reason. As Tunde navigated the chaotic Lagos traffic, weaving through yellow Danfo buses and street hawkers with the precision of a stuntman, he stole a glance at her. She was praying under her breath, her eyes closed tight. "Which hospital?" he snapped. "St. Jude's Public Clinic, sir, near the market," she whispered. When they arrived, the smell hit Tunde first, a suffocating mix of bleach, unwashed bodies, and the stagnant air of a facility that had long since run out of hope. He pushed past the crowded waiting room, his expensive leather shoes clicking on the stained tiles. There, in a corner on a hard wooden bench, sat an elderly woman holding a small boy. It was David. The boy was 8 years old, but his body looked fragile, like glass ready to shatter. His hands and feet were puffed up, the skin stretched tight from the dactylitis, the agonizing swelling caused by blocked blood flow. He wasn't just crying, he was making a low, rhythmic moaning sound that pierced Tunde's soul. "Mama, I brought the money," Blessing screamed, rushing to her son. A nurse with a bored expression looked up from her desk, her arms crossed. "Keep your voice down, woman. Do you have the N5000 deposit? If not, move aside for those who are ready. We don't have enough beds or oxygen for charity cases today." Tunde stepped forward, his presence filling the cramped hallway like a thunderstorm. He pulled out a thick wad of N1000 notes and slammed them onto the counter. The sound was like a gunshot. "Take this! Take all of it!" Tunde hissed, his eyes burning with a fury the nurse had never seen. "If you don't get this boy into a bed, with a private doctor and a morphine drip in the next 60 seconds, I will buy this entire hospital tomorrow morning just so I can fire you personally." The change in the atmosphere was instantaneous. The nurse, who a moment ago had been as cold as a tombstone, scrambled to her feet. The sight of the thick stack of bills, more than her monthly salary, was a miraculous cure for her indifference. "Emergency! Gurney here, now!" she shouted, her voice shrill. Within seconds, 2 orderlies appeared, lifting David's limp, fragile body from his grandmother's arms and onto a rusted stretcher. Tunde stood in the middle of the hallway, his chest heaving. The smell of antiseptic and old blood swirled around him, thickening the air. As he watched the orderlies wheel David toward the treatment room, the white walls of the clinic seemed to blur and melt away. Suddenly, he wasn't a 42-year-old billionaire. He was a skinny 12-year-old boy in a one-room face-me-I-face-you apartment in Mushin. He could feel the heat of the Lagos sun through a broken window. He could hear the ragged, wet gasps of his younger brother, Tayo. "Tunde, it hurts. My legs are on fire," Tayo had whispered, his eyes yellowed with jaundice. Their mother had been out in the market, begging for a loan that never came. By the time they carried Tayo to the clinic on foot, his heart had already given up. He had died in Tunde's arms, right there on the dusty floor of a waiting room just like this one, because they lacked the deposit. A hand touched Tunde's shoulder, snapping him back to the present. It was Blessing. She was trembling so hard she could barely stand. "Thank you, sir. God will bless you. You don't know what you have done." "I know exactly what I've done, Blessing," Tunde said, his voice a low, jagged rasp. Just then, a man in a pristine white lab coat stepped out of an office. He looked well-fed, his skin glowing with the health of a man who didn't miss meals. This was Dr. Femi Coker. He looked at the money on the counter, then at Tunde's expensive watch, and a greasy smile spread across his face. "I hear we have a VIP guest," Dr. Coker purred. "I am the chief administrator. Don't worry, we will give the boy the premium treatment now." Tunde's eyes narrowed. Premium treatment? You mean the treatment you should have given him 2 hours ago? My people, the tension is rising. Do you think Tunde was right to use his power to jump the line? Or is he just feeding a corrupt system? Hit the like button if you think David will pull through. Tell me, have you ever had to fight for a loved one's life in a place that didn't care? Inside the treatment ward, the air was thick with the scent of rubbing alcohol and the muffled cries of children. David lay on a narrow cot, his small chest rising and falling in shallow, jagged movements. A nurse was finally setting up an IV line, the clear fluid meant to hydrate his thickened, sluggish blood. He needs high-volume hydration and morphine for the pain, Tunde said, his voice surprisingly knowledgeable. He stood at the foot of the bed, his arms crossed over his designer shirt. And check his oxygen saturation. If his blood is sickling in his lungs, we're looking at acute chest syndrome. Dr. Coker's eyebrows shot up. You speak like a medical man, Mr. Adeleke. But please, leave the diagnostics to us. We are doing our best with limited resources. Limited resources? Tunde swept his gaze across the room. He saw a broken ventilator in the corner and a stack of stained bedsheets. I saw the sign outside. This clinic receives grants from the National Sickle Cell Foundation. You are a Center of Excellence. Where is the money going, Doctor? Dr. Coker stiffened, his oily smile faltering. Grants only go so far, sir. The cost of specialized care is astronomical. Most of these parents can't even pay for a basic consultation. Tunde looked at Blessing, who was hovering over David, whispering words of encouragement into the boy's ear. She was a woman who worked 2 jobs, who meticulously recorded every N50 she borrowed from a receptionist's drawer just to keep her son alive. She was the face of 1 million Nigerians fighting a silent war against their own genetics. Sickle cell disease is a battle of flow. When the red blood cells lose oxygen, they warp into stiff, sickle-like shapes. They don't glide through the veins. They hook onto each other, creating a microscopic logjam that starves the organs of oxygen. That logjam is what causes the crisis, the excruciating pain that feels like glass shards moving through the marrow. I want a full report on David's condition by morning, Tunde commanded, ignoring the doctor's excuses. And Dr. Coker, if I find out that a single kobo of those grants is being spent on anything other than these children, you will find that I am a very difficult man to ignore. As Tunde turned to leave, Blessing caught his hand. Her touch was rough from years of scrubbing floors, but her grip was firm. Why are you doing this, sir? You don't even know us. Tunde looked at her, and for a fleeting moment, the billionaire boss mask slipped. I'm not doing it for you, Blessing. I'm doing it for a boy who didn't get this chance 30 years ago. Tunde didn't go home. He sat in his Range Rover in the hospital parking lot, the glowing screen of his laptop illuminating his face in the dark. The smell of expensive leather and stale coffee filled the cabin. He wasn't looking at his import-to-export spreadsheets. He was looking at the public records of St. Jude's Clinic. He called Cheek, his childhood friend and top forensic auditor. Cheek, wake up. I need you to run a deep dive on a Dr. Femi Coker and the grants for St. Jude's. Follow the money, now. While Cheeky worked, Tunde walked back into the ward. David was finally sleeping, his breathing less laboured thanks to the oxygen mask. Blessing was slumped in a plastic chair by his side, her hand still clutching David's. He is stable for now, a young resident doctor whispered to Tunde, away from Coker's watchful eyes. We've started him on strong analgesics and IV fluids to wash out the sickled cells. But sir, the problem is bigger than one crisis. He needs regular hydroxyurea to prevent these episodes, and he needs a stable supply of folic acid. His mother can't afford the admin fees the chief doctor adds to every pill. Tunde's blood boiled. Admin fees for life-saving medication? It's an open secret, sir. The resident sighed, looking around nervously. Dr. Coker calls it the Sustainability Fund. In reality, he has a new mansion in Lekki Phase 1, while our oxygen tanks are often empty. Tunde's phone buzzed. It was an email from Cheeky. The attachments were damning. Bank statements showing massive transfers from the hospital's charity account to a private shell company. Over N50 million intended for sickle cell research and patient care had vanished into Coker's pockets over the last 2 years. My story, family. The mask is slipping. Greed is a poison that kills faster than any disease. Do you think Tunde should confront Coker immediately, or wait to gather more evidence? Hit the subscribe button if you want to see this doctor face justice. Just as Tunde was about to walk into Coker's office, his phone rang again. It was Mrs. Gubemi, his head of HR. Her voice was shrill and devoid of any empathy. Mr. Adeleke, I've reviewed the security footage. This Blessing woman is a common thief. I've already contacted the area command. The police are on their way to the hospital to pick her up. We must protect the company's integrity, sir. Tunde gripped the steering wheel of his emotions. You did what, Gubemi? The silence of the hospital ward was shattered by the rhythmic stomp, stomp, stomp of heavy boots and the sharp, rhythmic jingle of handcuffs. Tunde looked towards the entrance. Mrs. Gubemi was marching down the hallway, her face set in a mask of corporate righteousness, followed by 2 officers in dark uniforms. There she is, Mrs. Gubemi said, pointing a manicured finger at Blessing, who was still slumped by David's bed. That's the thief. Officer, do your duty. Blessing bolted upright, her eyes widening with a primal terror. She looked from the police to Tunde, her hands trembling so violently that the small notebook fell to the floor. Sir, I thought you said... Stay where you are, Blessing, Tunde commanded. He stepped into the path of the officers, his tall frame acting as a human shield between the law and the mother. Mrs. Gubemi, I told you to wait for my instructions. Why are the police here? Integrity is the cornerstone of Adeleke imports, sir, Mrs. Gubemi argued, her voice rising. If we let a cleaner steal today, the managers will embezzle tomorrow. We must set an example. She admitted to it. She has a ledger of her crimes. The senior officer, a man with a tired face and a dusty uniform, stepped forward. Move aside, sir. We have a report of theft. We have to take her to the station for questioning. She's not going anywhere, Tunde said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, low vibrato. The theft you're talking about is a N2,450 debt that she documented and intended to repay. It's a civil matter at best, and as the owner of the company, I am declining to press charges. But I've already filed the formal report, Mrs. Gubemi shrieked. The process has started. Blessing began to sob, a sound of pure heartbreak. Please, my son is just waking up. If he sees me in handcuffs, it will kill him. Please. Tunde looked at the officer. Officer, look at that boy on the bed. He is in a sickle cell crisis. His mother was borrowing coins to buy him water and medicine because this hospital and this country has failed him. If you take her now, you are signing that child's death warrant. Are you prepared to have that on your conscience for 2,000 naira? The officer looked at David, so small, so pale, hooked up to a clicking machine. He looked at Tunde's expensive suit, then at Blessing's tear-stained face. He sighed, adjusting his belt. We'll wait in the hallway, but sir, the report is filed. Unless it's withdrawn by the complainant, our hands are tied. Tunde turned his gaze to Mrs. Gubemi. It wasn't a look of anger. It was a look of profound disappointment. Gubemi, you have worked for me for 10 years. Is this who you are? A woman who would put a mother in a cell while her son fights for breath over the price of a lunch sandwich. Mrs. Gbemi didn't flinch. She adjusted her glasses, her eyes as cold as a Lagos Harmattan morning. Rules are rules, Mr. Adeleke. If we make exceptions for pity, the system collapses. I am doing my job. Tunde stepped so close to her that she had to tilt her head back. The smell of his expensive oud perfume seemed to choke her. Your job was to manage people, Gbemi, not to hunt them. You saw a woman drowning and you decided to step on her head. That's not corporate integrity. That's cruelty. He turned to the officers. Gentlemen, the complainant is the company, and I am the owner of that company. I am officially withdrawing the report. Now, if you want to be useful, clear this hallway. This is a hospital, not a parade ground. The officers, sensing the shift in power, nodded and began to usher a protesting Mrs. Gbemi toward the exit. You're making a mistake, Tunde, she screamed as she was led away. She's a thief. You'll regret this. Tunde didn't look back. He turned to Blessing, who had collapsed into the chair, her face buried in her hands. He knelt beside her, the billionaire boss on the dirty hospital floor. She's gone, Blessing. No one is taking you anywhere. Why? Blessing whispered, looking at him with eyes that had seen too much sorrow. You don't even know me. To you, I am just the woman who cleans the toilets at night. To me, Tunde said, his voice thick with a memory he could no longer suppress. You are the mother I wish my brother had beside him when he was dying. You are the fighter he needed. Suddenly, the monitors connected to David began to beep frantically. The boy's body began to stiffen, his back arching off the thin mattress. His eyes rolled back, and a terrifying guttural sound escaped his throat. Nurse! Doctor! Blessing screamed, her voice hitting a pitch of pure agony. Dr. Coker rushed in, followed by the young resident. He looked at the monitor and then at Tunde. He's having a neurological complication. It could be a stroke. We need to move him to the ICU immediately, but the ICU beds are, well, they require a different level of financial commitment. Tunde grabbed Coker by the lapels of his white coat, slamming him against the wall. Move him now. If that boy loses a single brain cell because you're waiting for a bank alert, I will ensure the last thing you see in this life is the inside of a prison cell. I have Chaik's audit, Coker. I know where the grant money went. Family, they are trying to take everything from her. They are using David's life as a bargaining chip. If you want to see justice served and this corrupt doctor exposed, make sure you are subscribed. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Tell me in the comments, what would you do if a doctor demanded money while your child was dying? The ICU was a different world, colder, quieter, and filled with the rhythmic hiss-click of ventilators. David lay amidst a web of tubes, his small face partially obscured by an oxygen mask. The monitor showed a jagged, frantic heart rate. The young resident doctor looked at the preliminary scans with a grim expression. It's a stroke, Mr. Adeleke, the resident whispered. In sickle cell patients, especially children, the sickled cells can block the major arteries to the brain. If we don't perform an exchange transfusion immediately to swap his sickled blood for healthy donor blood, the damage will be permanent. He might never speak or walk again. Tunde looked at Blessing. She was kneeling by the bed, her forehead pressed against the cold metal railing, her silent prayers shaking her entire frame. He felt a phantom pain in his own chest, an echo of the day Tayo's eyes had gone blank. Then do it, Tunde commanded. We can't, Dr. Coker interrupted, his voice trembling as he tried to regain some authority despite the threat of the audit. We don't have enough units of AA blood in the bank, and the specialist hematologist, Dr. Amadi, is across the city. He won't come out at 3:00 a.m. for a patient with no insurance. Tunde didn't argue. He pulled out his phone. I don't care about insurance. I care about results. He dialed a number. Dr. Amadi, it's Tunde Adeleke. I have a boy here, 8 years old, sickle cell, mid-stroke. I'm sending my private security detail to your house right now to escort you to St. Jude's. If you beat them here, I'll double your annual research grant. If you don't bother answering my calls again. Tunde turned back to Coca, his eyes like flint. As for the blood, call every private lab in Lagos. I will pay for a police escort to bring the units here. If there is a single delay because of a form or a fee, I will personally ensure you never practice medicine again. The next hour was a blur of high-stakes motion. Tunde's world of high finance and import logistics was suddenly redirected toward a single goal: saving David. The smell of ozone and sterile floor wax hung heavy in the air as the specialist arrived, his face set in grim determination. My people, the clock is ticking. Every second counts when the brain is starving for air. Do you think Tunde's wealth can buy a miracle? Or is David's fate already sealed? The exchange transfusion machine hummed with a clinical, rhythmic thud, a sound that felt like a secondary heartbeat in the silent ICU. Dr. Amadi worked with a surgeon's precision, his brow beaded with sweat despite the blast of the AC. He was physically removing David's sickled, rigid blood and replacing it with healthy donor units. The next few hours are critical, Dr. Amadi whispered to Tunde, his eyes never leaving the monitor. We are trying to reduce the percentage of sickle hemoglobin, HbS, to less than 30%. If we can do that, the blood will flow again. The pressure on his brain will lift. Tunde stood by the window, watching the first light of dawn touch the Lagos skyline. The red dust of the city was beginning to rise as the morning traffic built up. He felt a vibration in his pocket. His phone was blowing up. It was Chika. Tunde checked the blogs. Now, Gbemi didn't just go to the police. She went to Lagos Gist Daily. Tunde opened the link. The headline made his stomach churn. Billionaire Tunde Adeleke shields thief. Cleaner caught red-handed, boss refuses justice. There was a blurry photo of Blessing being led away from the office, looking like a common criminal. Mrs. Gbemi had leaked the security footage, framing it as a wealthy man being blinded by pity for a dishonest employee. She wants to force my hand, Tunde growled. She thinks that by making this public, I'll be forced to fire Blessing to save my company's reputation. Blessing had seen the phone. She looked at the headline, her face turning a ghostly grey. Sir, I told you. My pride is all I have left. Now the whole world thinks I am a thief. David will grow up and see this. He will be ashamed of me. No one is going to be ashamed, Blessing, Tunde said, his voice hard. Gbemi thinks she's playing a corporate game. She doesn't realize I'm playing for a child's life. He stepped out of the ICU and called his PR director. I want a press conference at the hospital entrance in 2 hours. Not about the theft, about St. Jude's Clinic. And I want Dr. Femi Coca's bank statements printed on every flyer. My story, family. The stakes are getting higher. Mrs. Gbemi is trying to destroy Blessing's name to save her own ego. Do you think a person's reputation is worth more than their life? Hit the like button if you want Tunde to crush this scandal. Tell me in the comments, how would you handle a coworker who tried to ruin you? The morning sun beat down on the hospital parking lot, turning the red dust into a shimmering haze. A sea of reporters, lured by the promise of a billionaire's scandal, jostled for position. Microphones from major Lagos news outlets were taped to a makeshift podium. Mrs. Gbemi stood at the edge of the crowd, a smug smile playing on her lips, certain she was about to witness Blessing's final ruin. Tunde Adeleke stepped into the light. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket. His sleeves were rolled up, and his eyes were rimmed with the exhaustion of a man who had been through a war. Beside him stood Cheeky, holding a thick stack of documents. "You are all here because you heard a story about a thief," Tunde began, his voice amplified by the speakers and cutting through the humid air. "But I am here to tell you a story about a system that treats children like commodities and mothers like criminals." He held up Blessing's small, tattered notebook. "This is what my head of HR called evidence of a crime. To me, it is a ledger of love. Every N50 recorded here was a mother trying to buy a bottle of water for a son whose blood was turning into shards of glass in his veins." He paused, letting the silence hang heavy. "David has sickle cell disease. It is a genetic condition, not a curse, not a spiritual attack, but a biological reality that requires management, hydration, and empathy." While Blessing was counting coins, Tunde's voice rose to a roar. Dr. Femi Koka was counting millions. "Chike, show them." Chike began distributing the audit reports. The reporters scrambled for the papers, their cameras flashing as they captured the evidence of the embezzled charity funds. The smell of expensive ink on the fresh printouts seemed to mix with the tension in the air. "This hospital receives grants for free sickle cell care, yet they demand deposits while children suffer strokes in their hallways." Tunde pointed toward the hospital entrance just as Dr. Koka tried to slip away. "There is your thief, ladies and gentlemen. Not the woman scrubbing floors to save her son, but the man in the white coat who built a mansion on the suffering of the poor." The crowd erupted. The narrative shifted like a tide. Reporters who had come to shame a cleaner were now chasing a corrupt administrator. Mrs. Gbemi's smile vanished as she realized she hadn't just lost a battle, she had lost her career. Inside the ICU, the frantic noise of the world outside faded into a steady, rhythmic beep. The air was cold, smelling of ozone and the faint, sweet scent of the oranges Blessing had brought earlier. Tunde stood by the bed, his shadow long against the wall, watching David. Suddenly the boy's eyelids fluttered. A small, weak groan escaped his lips. "David," Blessing whispered, leaning so close her tears fell onto the white bedsheets. "David, my king, can you hear me?" The boy's eyes opened. They were still slightly yellowed, but the glazed look of the stroke was gone. He looked at his mother, then slowly shifted his gaze to Tunde. He didn't know the man in the expensive shirt, but he saw the kindness in his eyes. "Mama, my legs." "They don't hurt as much," David croaked. The relief in the room was a physical weight lifting. Dr. Amadi stepped forward, checking the boy's reflexes. The exchange transfusion worked. He's a fighter, Blessing. With proper care, constant hydration, avoiding extreme cold, and a daily dose of hydroxyurea, he can live a full, brilliant life. Tunde felt a lump in his throat. He turned to Blessing. "The police have taken Koka for questioning. Cheek is working with the Ministry of Health to oversee this facility. As for you, I want you to come back to Adeleke Imports. Not as a cleaner. I need an office manager who understands the value of every kobo and the weight of integrity. The salary will be 10 times what you make now." Blessing looked at her son, then back at Tunde. Her pride, forged in the fires of poverty, flared in her eyes. "Sir, you have saved my son's life. I owe you everything. But I will not take a job I haven't earned. I am a cleaner because that is what I know. I don't know how to manage an office." "Then let me teach you." Tunde stepped closer, his voice softening. "I'm not giving you charity, Blessing. I'm making an investment. You have a strength that can't be taught in business school." "I will go to school first," Blessing insisted, her chin tilted high. "I will work and I will learn. Only when I am ready will I sit in that chair." Tunde smiled, a genuine, rare smile. In that moment, the class difference between the billionaire and the cleaner vanished. There was only mutual respect and a burgeoning spark that neither was ready to name. "Deal," Tunde said. "But while you study, David's health is my responsibility. I am starting a foundation. Blessing. The Tunde Adeleke Sickle Cell Foundation. We will provide free genetic counseling for couples and specialized care for every child who is turned away because they can't pay a deposit." My story family, we are reaching the end. Blessing chose her dignity over a shortcut. Do you think she was right to refuse the promotion? Hit the like button if you believe in working for your dreams. 1 year later, the lobby of Adeleke Imports was filled with the scent of fresh lilies and expensive coffee. The grainy security monitors were still there, but they now captured a different story. Blessing walked through the glass doors, not in a faded apron, but in a sharp, cobalt blue power suit that complemented her radiant skin. In her hand, she clutched her diploma in business management. She had worked half days and studied through the nights, refusing every shortcut Tunde offered. She had earned her seat at the table. Tunde stood at the top of the stairs, watching her with a pride that transcended business. David was by his side, looking healthy and vibrant. The boy no longer had the yellowed eyes of a crisis. He was active, his growth spurt making him look more like a young man every day. Thanks to the Tunde Adeleke Foundation, David had access to daily hydroxyurea and specialized care that managed his condition perfectly. "You're late for your first board meeting as operations manager," Tunde teased as she reached the top. "I had to drop off the donation checks at the clinic," Blessing replied, her voice steady and confident. "The new pediatric wing is officially open. No deposits required." Tunde led her into his office, the same room where he had once accused her of theft. On his desk sat a velvet box, but it didn't contain a diamond. He opened it to reveal a set of legal documents. "Blessing, you've proven you can manage my company," Tunde said, his voice dropping to a heartfelt whisper. "But I realized I don't want to just be your boss or your benefactor. This is a petition for legal adoption. I want to officially be David's father. I want him to carry the name of the man who saved him and the name of the brother I couldn't save." Blessing's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the papers, then at the man who had turned her world upside down. "And what about us, Tunde?" Tunde pulled a second paper from behind the first, a marriage license. "I thought we'd start with the family and then build the forever. Will you walk with me?" That afternoon, they didn't go to a fancy restaurant. They went to the National Stadium for the Sickle Cell Awareness Walk. Thousands of people were there, wearing red. Tunde, Blessing, and David walked hand in hand, carrying a banner that read, "Know your genotype. As plus as. A risk, but love plus care. A life." And that, my family, is how a moment of judgment turned into a lifetime of justice. God works in mysterious ways, and sometimes the person you think is your enemy is actually the answer to your prayers. Thank you for journeying with me. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Stay blessed.